The title here, as you see, My Life with Watson, a tour of my working on cognitive computing solutions. So I'm going to give you a tour of sort of some of my experiences, but it's not about me. It's about you guys looking at what you might do on your career. Not just your first job, but some of the decisions you'll make and the way you can grow your career. And just yourself as an individual and have personal satisfaction in the work you do. And some of the things you've heard the first two speakers today talk about, I'll just sort of reiterate. Walking around out there, looking at some of the potential job opportunities with consulting, there's common themes: working on cloud, working in big data, analytics, security, mobile. And one of the common themes is who are you going to do all that development for? It's not about you in developing a widget or a feature or a type library or some extensibility for an integration. Those things are cool, but there's a reason for it. It's because presumably there's a customer, there's a solution. There are users trying to do something with software, and you're going to implement something that's going to contribute to user experience ultimately. And that doesn't mean just user interfaces. I mean, that is what the users interact with. But there's all kinds of interfaces nowadays, and it's going to get more complex. It already is, right, with Internet of Things, sensors, all kinds of devices. So we're not just talking about mobile. So I'm going to go through some of my experiences, but again, I'm mostly focused on trying to say little tidbits of advice and lessons learned in my career. So a little bit about me and some concepts: agility and design thinking, some of the things I've worked on. One prototype that I led a project, a sample Watson project, we'll go through a little bit. And a little bit about knowing your audience. The previous speaker, who was a guru on MySQL, he talked about documentation, and most of my career, I've been a technical writer. So I'm currently a software development and information development manager. I guess I should go to background. So I studied computer science in college a long time ago. I have kids your age now. And studied algorithms, really concentrated on analysis of algorithms and mathematics. And I was also a competitive distance runner. And I used to joke that I really majored in athletics in college and I minored in computer science. That's not funny, but I was a serious distance runner. Then I moved into sports writing, and I really enjoy writing. So my whole career, I've kind of combined technology, problem solving, and articulating, documentation, being able to write technical things for who? Software developers, primarily. And I worked in Rational Software. In 2003, IBM acquired Rational Software. But Rational Software is and was a company that built software development tools for change management, software configuration management, requirements management, test management, modeling. And all of those offerings also had extensibility, APIs. So I was doing the documentation of the APIs for developers to extend those software development tools. A few years ago, I got to go to a conference in Brazil, and before I went back home, I live on the East Coast near Boston, Massachusetts. I got to go to the IBM office in Sao Paulo, and one of the big customers in Brazil is Itaú Unibanco, huge bank, and I went to their office, and they showed me their implementation of our tool. So Itaú's information technology department, they configured our software for their enterprise, and Itaú's developers were using change management. That was a Rational tool. But it was interesting because, of course, it was in Portuguese Brazilian, and it was all same but different. So it was very interesting. I want to focus on this a little bit. So in IBM, we have values. Every company does, right? What do you stand for? What's your mission statement? We have, values, and this is sort of paraphrasing, but these three is dedication to client success, innovation that matters, and trust and personal responsibility in all our relationships. When you think about that, it's like I said at the beginning, if you're a consultant or whatever you're doing in development, who is it for? It's for presumably a client. And a client could be anything. It could be a top secret government contract. It could be the military that's not top secret or is. It could be in finance, investment. It could be people, the general public, advisors, healthcare, etc. And innovation that matters, again, so the previous presentation mentioned that he didn't like patents in big companies. Patents are sort of a negative, and his point is well taken. Nevertheless, I work for the company that has more patents than any in the world. Year after year, 25 years in a row, we have more patents than anybody. And the goal isn't just to have patents, it's to do innovation that matters. And the innovation presumably is driven by customer-driven development, meaning you're trying to solve problems that matter to customers, and your innovation is to help address something that somebody really is looking for you to help solve. And trust and personal responsibility, really just whether you're working remotely from home, whether you're working in an office, whether you work in a small team of 5 people, you share your expertise, you create an open environment of inclusion of all types. And I'm proud and thankful for the company that I work in that really embraces these things, where everybody, there's no stupid questions. Everybody that's trying to learn and think, you give them the best you can, you share, and you create an open environment. So it's a pleasant place to work, and they're just good values no matter where you work. And again, I think I've just covered this, but really understanding a client, what they're trying to do, and daring to create original ideas, thinking out of the box. If you can find a company that encourages these types of characteristics, you can have a very rewarding career where you get to think and not just do. So I'm a manager. You guys, when you go into the workforce, you'll be entry level. Do you want to be, you will at the beginning be told what to do essentially, but you'll also be encouraged to learn. And you will and should take the initiative to be a learner. Don't just do what you're told, because if all you do is what you're told, that's not good enough. You're too smart for that, and you want to find the areas of interest, find passions, learn about them, grow, share that with your manager, and in any good company, managers are going to embrace that and help you to grow your career, because you really don't grow your career that quickly if you just do what you're told. Like if you're given 5 defects in a given sprint, you knock down those 5 defects, that's good, that's check. That's not check plus. Agile development, so trains and streams. I'm only going to, I think I have 1 or 2 slides. I'm not going to go on and on. But as a manager, and I showed something earlier, design thinking. What does that mean? And customer-driven development, I mentioned. There's something called product management. In our company, we currently call it offering management, because we're not just selling products. We might be selling services. We might be selling solutions, integration points. Whatever it is, though, there's presumably a manager who owns that offering. They interact with customers, prospective customers, and they understand, what do we need to do? What's the market opportunity? What can we build and make a lot of money, frankly, because a lot of customers are looking for the same thing. Those are requirements. And hills are part of what's design thinking. Designers work with managers and development managers to define hills that capture the requirements. What are we going to develop? What are we going to design and develop? We can't boil the ocean. What are we going to do? And what's the highest priority? And that starts by, I'll give you an example. So I'll say in a search bar, because I'll be showing some pictures of a search bar, but it's not really search. It's an input bar. Users don't understand how to work with the right entity. They can input a gene or a chemical or a disease, and they don't know what the heck they're doing. So the hill might be, there might be a whole bunch of requirements coming from customers and prospective customers saying, we don't understand how to work with the right entity. We need better support for synonyms that can expand the result set. We need better query disambiguation to narrow the scope so that when I put an input, it's not sending me off in altogether all different directions, but it's really focused on what I'm looking for. So that's actually a real example of a hill that I managed was users want to work with the right entity. And I just mentioned two things, synonym support and query disambiguation. Those are big features. So designed workflows, mock-ups, designs for all of that in what are called epics. In development, my team, I had team leads, they created epics for each of the two things I just said, and we work in 2 to 4 week sprints, and those things weren't going to be completed in a sprint. Those are going to take some time. It's going to be iterative. So the epic would capture synonym support, and let's say that's going to take 3 months or 6 months, and I just said sprints are, let's say, 3 weeks. So the team leads managed by me, but they did it because they're the subject matter experts. They defined stories with their teams for each sprint to iteratively complete the epic, which was synonym support or query disambiguation. Guys and gals like you, let's say you're entry level and you're on those teams, those team leads would work with you and assign you tasks. A story is completed not until all the child tasks have been completed. And tasks aren't only development, there's documentation, there's testing. When all those things are done, meaning development's been implemented, test has been run, integration, functional, system verification testing, and the item's been documented as it should be, it's all done, then the thing is done, and I don't really have a line, but essentially there's traceability in any kind of a robust system. We use rational team concert to trace the requirements to the epics all the way to the stories, so you have traceability to see what's been done. Are there dependencies? Are there blockers? Because this is oversimplified. There isn't one development stream or team. There's some projects, there's 27 of those, and they're blockers, and there might be a back-end API that a UI development team can't do anything with until the back-end APIs have been implemented. So those kinds of things would be traceability, where relationships from stories from one team to another. And I'm going to right there stop and say a little bit of advice. Go beyond the people you work directly with, because the first speaker today mentioned, I think she mentioned networking. One of the values is trust and responsibility. Well, I challenge you guys to create the network of collaborators that would be relevant to you to be the best you can be. So if you're working on a task there, don't just go to your team lead. Maybe you could start with asking your team lead, but say, I have some questions for design. Create the relationships with the designers, with the testers. Don't just always go to your manager. Be proactive. I did hear that word earlier. And create that network. There's people like you in all those different squads. Don't all be in silos. Know those people. Understand a little bit of some of the relationships. It's more rewarding and it's more effective to get your work done. And you'll get, generally the bigger your network, the more opportunities you'll create for yourself on newer projects. So some of I was lucky to come in, well, I started in Watson in the very beginning of 2012, and that was right when Watson was just starting up as a group in IBM. It's much bigger now. There were only about 100 of us back then, and it was truly a startup. And it was called Watson Core Technology. And since then, there's been an evolution of some different offerings, attempts to productize the research code base. And now I currently work in Watson Health, so healthcare and life sciences offerings. So you don't have to read that, or you can, but raise your hand if you know the game show, or you've heard of the game show Jeopardy. Okay, good, some of you at least. So I never watched television, and I don't think I've ever watched the game show Jeopardy, but let's just say an example of a question in Jeopardy is there's only one person who, the game show host, right, Alex Trebek, would say something like, he was the best soccer player in Portugal. And then the correct answer is, who was Cristiano Ronaldo? Is that a fair, or is that not the right answer? I mean, maybe there's somebody better, I don't know. But all right, a fair answer. So a Watson in 2011 basically beat the two best champions, and it did it all voice. So it was literally answering questions, doing question analysis, and it was how? A massive hardware and software system, massive parallel processing, and something called deep QA, deep question answering technology built on open source, UEMA, unstructured information management architecture. So it was built on UEMA as a set of annotators. And we can make these slides available to you later, but essentially this thing is called a pipeline. It was the Watson pipeline. And each of the boxes is a component of UEMA code and is considered an annotator. So I'll just briefly read through. So the question is being asked, it's being analyzed. I'll say Watson is generating hundreds of hypotheses, possible answers, and that's called hypothesis generation. And then candidate answers, like there's lots of, just think about when somebody asks you a question, you have candidate answers in your head, maybe if you don't know the exact answer, right? And you're scoring and weighting them, and that's what's happening. A whole bunch, the parallel processing is that all these boxes, there will be hundreds of them as you're going from left to right, where you're generating thousands of potential answers, hundreds I'll say, not thousands. Depends on the application, could be configured. You're filtering, you're scoring, you're weighing. How do you decide if one answer is a potential answer is better than another? By evidence, by the data, by the corpus, the content that you've ingested that's going to be able to answer the questions. I think in the original Watson, it was all of Wikipedia and a whole bunch of other things. So just imagine, you ask a question, you're referring to all the data in Wikipedia and going, oh, this one seems pretty good, this one seems better. And then at the end, essentially, it's merging and ranking all of those potential answers. There's also machine learning involved, and you're coming out with answers in confidence. Now, in the Jeopardy one, you're coming out with one answer. And in that solution, if the confidence was only, say, 40%, that Watson wasn't answering the question, wasn't pushing the buzzer, because it wasn't confident in the answer. And that could be configured. Depending on what kinds of questions you're asking, maybe 60% confidence is good enough. Maybe you don't want one answer. Maybe you're looking for the top 5 answers for your application. So the first Watson was to productize the Jeopardy code base, we used to say, and create a platform and a methodology to build domain-specific solutions. What is domain-specific? Specific means like build a Watson for finance, build a Watson for cancer treatment, etc. And I'm just going to kind of quickly, basically this is saying to build a domain-specific solution, you need to identify data. It's going to be your corpus. You're going to have to collect representative questions, and you're going to build something called a ground truth that trains machine learning models. It's question-answer pairs, representative questions. It's going to train the machine learning models. Then you're going to test that further down the road. And you're going to iteratively improve the accuracy. And you have to build a user experience. So like I was saying in the previous slide, depending on the use case, you might want one answer. maybe you're not looking for answers. Maybe you're looking for advice, recommendations. And I'm actually going to go back for 1 second to say that the Watson at this point is IBM and Watson are to build, the goal isn't to win game shows, and it's not to be a search engine. So, you know, when you say, who is Ronaldo, you can do just fine in a search engine and get reasonable links and go to more information. But if you're looking for cancer treatment advice because you have type 2 lung cancer, you probably don't want to use your search engine to find your best recommendations for treatment advice, right? There's probably better data out there that you're going to use. And it's not just out on the web. It's proprietary. There might be some, like clinicaltrials.gov. There's some public data sets. But you're going to be really concerned to curate an appropriate set of data, right? And how to train your models with. So one of the early Watson offerings was called Watson for Engagement. And like the Jeopardy, it was to just answer questions. How do I find life insurance? What do I do when I retire? Were some of the early examples. I won't, of course, say company names, but some of the prototypes were question answering. Identify a corpus of content, maybe a company's corpus, the literature, get representative questions that, say, customer support has fielded a lot, and create models based on the answers you have in the questions. And there's a couple of phrases called fat tail and long tail, or short tail, and fat tail is just sort of jargon for saying common questions that are asked constantly. They just customers keep asking, or whatever the users are. Everybody keeps asking these top 10 questions 40 times a day, but they don't all ask it the same way, right? They ask it in 50 different ways. There's where natural language processing comes in, is for the system to be intelligent enough to get the right answer when something's asked 50 different ways. And if you use a search engine, they're getting better, but you'll see that you don't really get synonym support in a search engine. Like if you ask a question 50 different ways, I'll bet you a beer, you'll get at least 20 different ways, maybe 50 different results, but you'll certainly get a lot of different results. You won't get consistency. So the power of the artificial intelligence here is training models to really zero in on the answers that people are looking for. And then Watson for Discovery, unlike what I just said, was looking for relationships, needles in haystack. Think about security. Think about drug research. Think about needles in haystacks where there's big data and you're looking for things like, there's a book that I'm reading right now by somebody named Nate Silver. It's called The Signal and the Noise. And it's looking for those relationships amidst all the data. Like, we'll get into it a little more about building a cohort. But when you see relationships, you want to see what's the evidence. Why are you showing me this relationship that might be relevant? So I'll leave it there. Watson for Drug Discovery that I'm going to show you a few screens on. So I managed this project for a while. Was a collection of applications for researchers and analysts to discover genes, drugs, diseases, and chemicals for promising drug exploration. So like if you're a huge pharmaceutical company, where do you start your research? Which chemicals or genes do you focus on? And again, you're not going to read this, but so you might want to look in the literature for co-occurring events, co-occurring high incidences of certain genes being correlated to chemicals, because that might be promising for a new drug discovery. Chemicals and entities, and then we have some predictive analytics and predict relationships. These are applications all within Watson for Drug Discovery. The user interface looks something like this. And in this one, this is Explore a Network. and 2 genes have been entered. You can see it says Medline abstracts. So there's different types of data. You can explore this thing. And right here, I'm saying, as it's set right now, I only want to see genes on the results. But I might only want to see drugs. The source years of the documents that are going to be the supporting evidence right now say 1809 to 2018. Maybe you only want to see the documents in the last 5 years. So you can adjust those things for the results. And this, what you get is a network, and the color codes are showing the nodes of the different genes, diseases, and drugs that were discovered or found to have relationships to the 2 inputs. So the 2 inputs are the circles there that you put in, and these are showing potentially entities that might be of interest for further research. Because at the end of all this, you're going to go back to the lab and do real laboratory research, is what this is supporting. And this is drilling down, if you want to see the evidence, you're drilling down into looking at the literature here, some of the Medline abstracts. This is showing how you can select a subset of things that might be interest and save it to a set that you can then refine and do deeper research. So it's iterative. And this is, I'm not a researcher and analyst, but this is designed with researchers and analysts in mind, and our designers worked with those types of people. So they didn't do this with their heads in the ground. They did it with subject matter experts to understand the use case for something that these users are really looking for to help them be more effective in their research. And just another one, predictive analytics. The idea here is, given a known set, show me some things that might be of interest. So if you've been doing research for 10 years and there are 3 genes that you know have a clear correlation to a certain disease, but you're looking for some other targets, this is a way to use against the literature, predictive analytics, to potentially find new entities, chemicals, diseases, genes, that would be worth your time researching. And again, I've been kind of hammering on this, but again, for your careers, again, when you work, think about what are you doing, what are you trying to do? Who is it for? What is the use case? What is the objective? What is the opportunity? Maybe, maybe there's, that's how innovation can begin. When you really try to think about the use case and the customer, what they're trying to do, that's when you can potentially have an innovation, have a patent, have a new idea that's going to solve a real customer use case. And so basically, I led a project called Watson on Watson, and that was a prototype, and we built a Watson solution that was able to answer questions about Watson itself. So as a technical writer, I led a team that created the documentation about Watson. So we built a corpus with our own documentation, and we collected representative questions that people were asking when they wanted to learn about Watson. It's really raining. And then we built a ground truth on our own content and representative questions and created machine learning models. And this thing got a lot of visibility within IBM, where everybody was using it for a little while. So, of course, a picture. This is just showing an example of synonym and language variation questions and intents. Like which of these questions are the same and which are different. Who is the best soccer player in Portugal? Who is the biggest star? Who is Ronaldo? Who is the highest paid athlete? And the reason I show these questions is that building a ground truth to train your machine learning models is difficult because you need to be consistent. Because if you don't use consistency in your question-answer pairs, you confuse the machine learning models. So for example, those are not all the same. They might all have the same answer, but they're not all the same question class. So if you put all those with the same answer in the same question group, that would not be good training. You'd want to split these out into the similarities. So there can be similar questions with the same intent and those with the same answer. And there can even be two groups with the same answer. But if there's 5 and 5 that are similar, but they're not the same, you don't put all 10 together. Those little subtleties will affect the training. So in a search engine, nicknames, if you ask who is Ronaldo, if you use all of these, I played around with this a little bit. I never knew about the Sultan of the Stepover. I don't know about that one, but CR7, you get pretty good results if you use CR7 instead of Ronaldo's name. If you use Ronnie, there are a lot of Ronnies out there, right? And if you're not in this country and you don't play soccer or love soccer, this ain't the right Ronnie, right? You're not going to get Ronaldo. So that was my point here. So back in the United States, when I put in who is Ronnie, that's what I get. You could train the system, if it was, and you would train it for something more important. Like if you were creating a sports app and you really wanted it to just nail all of the nicknames, then you would train so that Ronnie, if in fact you wanted Ronnie to be Ronaldo, you would put that in part of your training for your machine learning models. So these were the kinds of questions that I built a system. I led a team, to ask questions. What is Watson? What is cognitive computing? How are different? It should say, how are you different from a search engine? And all kinds of variations of these. And we opened up this app to 16,000 IBMers for, I think it was 3 hours, and thousands of the people that had access asked tons of questions, and a lot of them asked variations of these questions. And then, and then people got really excited about this application that we created that was just a prototype. And it got extended to where it supported multiple languages. And then it got extended to voice. So somebody could ask in German a question. It got converted to text, German text, converted to English, what is cognitive computing, into the pipeline, into the pipeline, it got answered. And then out of the pipeline, the English with cognitive services, it was translated and then turned to voice. Just to show that this could be done. And that at the time, interestingly, my job was to be documenting a methodology of how do you create a Watson solution. So I should have said that earlier. The reason I did all this in part was it's going to be a lot easier to document how to do it if we do it ourselves, right? So, and I wouldn't call this dog food. I'd call it champagne. It was pretty good. And so we drank our own champagne. A lot of people, some of the variations in the training, in the ground truth, on representative questions, these were some of the ways people were asking questions, like who is, what is, tell me about, is, do you know, are you able to, how can, do we can, and then gibberish. So off-topic questions, you can try this in Google. Like if you put just junk, some of these you'll get good answers, but in a solution that we're trying to answer questions about Watson, this is garbage. None of these questions, it's just noise. So they're called off-topic. So you code to you handle off-topic gracefully. There's different ways you can do that. You can define some. You can have sort of a blanket statement. What we had was a chat bot, which I might have more to say on, but basically we had some canned questions and answers that certain questions, like if I entered and said, I love you, Watson came back with a snarky answer. It didn't just sort of like give you a system error. It did something funny. So it tried to play, and people didn't know. They just thought Watson was answering them and being funny, but it was just a chat bot. It was just canned questions and answers. One of the interesting and I found satisfying things to do was to improve the accuracy, because we did this iteratively over about 6 months. And there's three, at least in traditional machine learning back when we did this, because this whole area has really advanced since then, was recall, precision, and accuracy. So basically, in a nutshell, recall is, do you have the answers in your corpus? And if not, you got to get that, because you can't answer questions if you don't have the content in your corpus. How precise are you with the precision? Like if I should have said, when Watson has an answer, a candidate answer, is the right answer, is it confident about the right answer, or is it confident about the wrong answer? That's precision. Wrong answers, not good answers, should have low confidence. Probable answers should have high confidence. That's better training. And you improve that iteratively. And accuracy is just the correctness indicator. What percentage of the questions is it hitting? And again, on the app though, on a discovery kind of application, you're not looking for one answer. In cancer treatment, you might be looking for 5 recommendations. So you might be wanting 5 answers that are 60% and higher accurate. I didn't say I said accurate, I meant confident. And then you might expand a domain, and that's complicated. So, suddenly you get new requests to support a whole other area of insurance advice, or a new product, another cancer type. So Watson for Oncology supports 15 different cancer types. That grew iteratively. They didn't boil the ocean and say, let's create an app that can provide high confidence, good treatment advice for 15 different cancer types. They started with lung cancer and colon cancer, and they iteratively have grown that because each use case, you need to have the right corpus, you need to do the testing, you need to have representative questions, build the ground truth, rebuild machine learning models. It's iterative. So that was then, and about 3 years ago, Watson really has expanded to become a platform. So this notion of a pipeline, there are some solutions. Watson for Oncology is one, which is a pipeline. But if you were to search, you can find it easily, Watson Developer Cloud or Watson Platform. They've decomposed it into individual services so that you don't have to take the whole thing. You could create a dialogue service. You could use speech to text. There's also services for Watson Health. Watson Health is a separate division. So when I started Watson in 2012, there was no Watson Health, there was no Watson. There was just Watson Core Technology. And then since then, there's the Watson Platform that provides a collection of services and tools to build solutions. There's Watson Health that has a lot of different solutions. And there's Watson Data Platform. And part of what's in Watson Data Platform is called Data Science Experience, which is a nice interface for doing data science in multiple languages. I'll show you a little bit of that, and we're almost done. This is just a couple of screen captures of what's out there for the Watson platform. Services, like I said, conversation, visual recognition, discovery, the speech to text and text to speech. And Watson Health is noble. Cause. I feel good about working there, and I hope you can work at a place that you like the mission statement. That if what you like is creating APIs or using APIs or building a UI, that's cool. But if you're doing it for a good purpose that can actually help your society or help people or help your country or help handicapped people, whatever, what's important to you, the environment, animals, animal cruelty, mattering, these things are good. And Watson Health I think it's a noble cause to try to be creating software to help lives, ultimately, and that's the mission. So I mentioned drug discovery, I showed you some screens. Some of the other things that I've been working on are Watson for patient safety, which is when people have an adverse event, they take a drug, a medicine, something bad happens, that's reported. So we have a solution for that, and one for clinical trial matching, which is cancer treatment on clinical trials. kinds of data: structured, unstructured, public, proprietary, medical notes and records. All of those are in Watson Health offerings. And this is, again, just extending the platform. Part of Watson is the IBM Cloud, a secure environment for data, and the data platform, tools and services to do analytics. And this is just a picture of data science experience and some of the things that you can do in here. It's a front end. Raise your hand if you have heard of or you know Jupyter Notebooks. Quite a few of you. Yeah, so this has an interface to Jupyter. Oops. And I guess I didn't show it, but so you can work in notebooks and you can do it in multiple languages. Oh, it's down there, Jupyter Notebooks, RStudio. You can use Python, SAS, R, I think are the, maybe Scala. You pronounce it Scala or Scala? Scala. And I'm just going to read through this briefly for you. So prescription drug campaign example, like when you do data science, raise your hand if you're interested in data science. Some of you. So when you do data science, you're doing it for a reason, not just because it's fun and interesting for yourself. Something's driving the analytics. It's a decision maker. It's somebody who is looking for data to support a decision that they in the company are going to make. Should we research this new drug? Do we have a problem in the Northeast region of our market? Should we start a new campaign to advertise in a different country, etc.? And that would drive some analytics. Like somebody's asking a question that you're going to look at data to come up with recommendations based on the real world data to help that decision maker make a more informed decision. They're looking for evidence. And business analysts understand the business, the use case. They can translate from the high-level decision maker to the data scientist. So this is really just showing a question, what it actually means, giving the data scientists some direction, like what data set should they go after, what should they do? Come back, and the business analyst is helping sort of analyze the data scientist's results and bringing that back to the decision maker to make more informed decisions. Now, a lot of this should be done with visualizations because the decision maker isn't going to want to look at a Jupyter notebook. They're going to want to look at charts, visualizations that illustrate, that visualize the stuff that the data scientist did. And lastly, for this is who needs to know what? So you heard the previous speaker talk about documentation and communication. Documentation is part of communication. Being able to articulate what it is you do, what needs to be done, restating questions so there's clarity on what are we trying to do here and why and where are we at. You work with we have an acronym, SME, Subject Matter Expert. We have a lot of, in Watson Health, I'm sort of a writer, computer science guy. I don't know cancer treatment. I don't know oncology. I don't know drug discovery. But we have subject matter experts with PhDs in things like biotechnology, bioinformatics, and medical professionals that really understand the use cases. So when you write software, you want to leverage subject matter experts. They might be consultants in your company that work with the customers, but it ties back to know your audience and understand the potential customer or the real customer and what they're trying to accomplish. So some of those are data scientists, developers, and for me, it's healthcare and research practitioners in the applications that I am involved with now. So when you think about user experience and design-driven thinking, these are some of the kinds of users of cognitive applications, and certainly the ones that I'm in. And I think anything that you're going to do in big data or analytics, there are developers, but there are analysts and decision makers. And think about that, decision makers. Somebody's trying to look for answers or recommendations or advice to make better decisions. That's the truth of even if you're talking about sensors. the decision maker might not be a person, right? Don't assume it's a person. And that's down below, you know, Internet of Things, IoT, and people in general public. Your audience might be a sensor on the front of a car that's making a decision. And then lastly, mattering. The first 3 bullets up there: dare to create original ideas, treasure wild ducks, and strive for moonshots. Those are terms from Ginny Romedy is our CEO. She talks about moonshots. It's be bold, be brave, think beyond. Like I said, as an entry-level position, learn, grow, look at opportunities, seek what might be possible. That's it. So, I wasn't supposed to do that one. Questions? Oh, thanks.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, all right. What was the initial motivation at IBM to create and develop Watson? And after that, did you instantly know you wanted to help in the health department in like cancer research?
So the motivation was to create something that is probabilistic and not programmatic, and not just for the sake of that, but it's really the next generation of technology to be able to multiple things: answer questions against data and show supporting evidence to help people make better decisions. So in some ways, the Jeopardy Watson was easy because it was built for one user, the game show host. All the questions are typically asked in a kind of consistent manner, that one user. And yes, there are multiple categories, but it was kind of a fixed, the domain was known to some extent, and the style of play was known. Earlier on in IBM's history, they did the same thing they played the grand champion of chess, right? And IBM, I don't know the results of that, to be honest with you, but I think they did. I think the IBM computer did very well in chess. The goal wasn't to play chess. It was to understand natural language and show that this was the future of artificial intelligence, the sort of the next generation, to leverage some things that have been in the works, which everybody knows that there's a lot of data out there that's really valuable, and it's not findable on a search engine. Companies, I've heard, well, I'll ask it out loud. Who can tell me what percentage of data is actually available on the web versus all the data? Anybody have an answer to that? I think it's like, yeah, nobody? I think it's like 10. It's a small percentage. It doesn't seem to make sense, but the quality data is proprietary, it's private, it's behind firewalls. And, you know, Itaú Unibanco, their important data, you can't surf on the web and get it. You get their customer service data. That's not what they're looking for to make better informed decisions internally. Or if you're talking about healthcare in particular, none of the data is available out there for good reason. And so back to your question, was that there's a need to create, there's an opportunity to create, to use artificial intelligence to help with decision support in business solutions. So the original Watson was to show that we can do this, and then immediately it was to productize the Jeopardy code base so that we called the productized code base was called the domain independent pipeline. So it had Wikipedia content, but right from the beginning, it was to be able to make it customizable. And healthcare has actually been the earliest area of Watson technology. You can ask me another question if I didn't answer it good enough, though.
Maybe someone else has a
Okay.
question.
there.
Thank you. I was just wondering, you mentioned the Watson on Watson experiment. Did it generate questions to another running search like Watson engine based on evidence or answers?
Good question. So no, it was an early prototype. Can you do now what you just described? Yes, with individual Watson platform services. So there's a dialogue service, and you can go, right, you can take data from the user and go back to the pipeline iteratively. For that early prototype, I was really focused on creating a corpus, collecting questions, building a ground truth, designing a user experience. It worked on both mobile and web. So no, but there are companies and us who are doing that now. Yeah, good question.
The other question was, do you, like this evidence that is corporate or corporate-owned, does the Watson access to part of that information, or just goes looking for it in the web?
No, definitely not on the web. You could, well, I said definitely not on the web, meaning what we did. In healthcare, so some of the applications do and can or could, meaning if you're doing something on financial advice, Watson, you want news feeds daily. You want to get, financial information. So that in that area, yes. So it depends on what your domain and the solution you're looking for. If you're looking supply chain management, maybe. It depends. In life sciences and pharmaceuticals, where you're looking at the literature, you don't really want or need a refresh every day. It would take a lot of work, and it wouldn't be worth the investment. Maybe monthly, maybe quarterly. How often do you want to refresh your data and do a newer refresh? It depends on the domain.
But how does it? How do you access that corporate information? Like the business provides that information up front, or just like there's a partnership?
To build a solution?
Yeah, and to gather the evidence.
Oh, the content, yeah.
The content
so right,
itself.
if you would work with the customer, the client, to identify the appropriate data set for your solution. So depending on what you're trying to do and what data you have and what data you might need to acquire. So, in healthcare, maybe you want clinicaltrials.gov because it has all of the clinical trials information. So Watson for clinical trial matching has that. Can use an example of, I work on Watson for drug discovery. It doesn't currently have clinicaltrials.gov in its corpus. But if, let's just say, a company is looking for another use case of drug discovery, and clinicaltrials.gov would significantly enhance the corpus, then you would add that and you would retrain to factor that in.
All right, thank you.
I already had given up on my question, sorry. You said on the first, your reply to the first question, you said that health data is not available out there for good reason. And
Sorry, could you repeat that?
You said on the answer to the first question, you said that healthcare data is not available out there for a good reason, and you did not elaborate on that. I was just wondering if you could please elaborate on why do you think that's a good reason, and also what do you think about SCIHub and the quest for openness in terms of research papers and etc.
Excellent questions. You're right. So I think it depends on the domain. So personal health information, of course not,
That's
right?
out of the question,
right.
of course.
Public data sets that are valuable to the general public, absolutely, and they are. But currently the public doesn't have a way to leverage those. So, you know, if I have cancer and I want to know about clinical trials, I actually haven't tested this, but, you know, is there a search in clinicaltrials.gov, gov is the United States gov, that I actually might find some interesting information, or can my doctor find interesting information of potentially good clinical cancer trial treatments for me? That's good. I mentioned a book called The Signal and the Noise, but what if that comes in at like the 50th best result on my search engine? I'll never find it. So I think some things should be publicly available, absolutely should be. And I think my prediction is a lot of the valuable information that's appropriate for the public will get democratized, and that will happen, kind of like open source in some ways, where I believe that information that's valuable to the general public won't be held away from people if it can help the world. I really believe that. I mean, that's my own personal optimism, that I think there'll be some degree of, it won't be just about the money and profit. At the end of the day, it's to help the world. And it might sound kind of corny, but like I really, like in IBM, I really am proud to be an IBMer, and work in Watson Health. We're not making billions of dollars. You don't read about us in the investment news about how many billions of dollars Watson Health is making. And yeah, it's too bad, I guess. You know, it'd be nice too. We'd get bigger bonuses, bigger raises, and all of that. But we're well compensated, and I go back, it's a noble cause. And at the end of the day, if we help cancer patients and diabetes patients, diabetes is one of the largest diseases in the world, and we never make $50 billion doing it, but we help people, and maybe we even democratize more of the information, I'll be proud to be part of that. What parts did I not answer, though?
What do you think about SCIHub?
About what?
SCIHub. I think that most people here should know about it. It's a place where you can actually download illegally papers that are published by several of the major publishing companies of articles, scientific articles. Most of them on your corpus, for example, you should incorporate, I think, a lot of data available there, but it's not available for the public, or at least not freely available, so to say. So
you think it should be available? You think?
I don't know.
You're asking me?
I'm asking.
So there are other sets like that. Wiley comes to mind, and Elsevier are a couple of proprietary data sets of lots of valuable published papers that you can't get to unless you're subscribed. I've been to Lisbon twice before for conferences for ACM. Association Computing Machinery. There's a digital library. You can't get to the papers for free. You got to have a license to the DL. Yeah, I mean, should we make them free? Maybe, but you know, is it viable, and how can that be done? And is it valuable? So I mean, like, should the general public, not should, how valuable would it be for the general public to be able to search all of the medical literature? I think you need a subject matter expert to help them sift through. That's my opinion, that there's too much data and it's too easy to be going down the wrong path. Like, have you ever had the experience of somebody reads something to you like it's a major citation and you're thinking, what the hell? Where did you find that? You know, and they're reading you a source they got on the web. It's like, that doesn't make it, you know, credible. And so I think opening things up like that to the general public is, I think there's an appropriate subset for the general public that's not like, aren't medical professionals. Speak for myself, like I'm not qualified to read the literature, you know, so.
Thanks.
So thank you for your questions. You can ask more if you want to Rob on the showcase. And give him a big round of applause, please.